Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate. Victory, victory, victory to the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Evam bhavatu. May it be so. Namaste, everyone. Welcome to our latest Monday live stream satsangha. It is absolutely wonderful being here with you once again. As people, I believe, know, we do this every Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time. And what this is a live satsangha. And this is presented to you by the International Sanatana Dharma Society. And what we do is, indeed, we have a satsangha, meaning that I give a little bit of a talk, usually. Sometimes it will vary, but usually I give a little bit of a talk for some time, and then that's followed afterwards by questions and answers. As I always have to remind people, and the moderators will remind you also, please don't ask any questions now. If you do, I won't see them, that's guaranteed. Rather, if you can please wait until I signal to you that it's time for questions and answers, then I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I have time to get to. And that being said, just a few very quick things that I want to say before we get into the main portion of what we will be doing, and that is a talk that I will be giving about the opulences of God, the divine opulences. And that is this. First of all, it is truly my pleasure to announce that our latest book is out. It is called Introduction to Sanatana Dharma. And this is a book that I have been working on for some time. And due to expert help from others, Tulasi Devi Mandaleshwari, very specifically, she formatted the book. She did all of the many procedures that were necessary in order to get the book published. I wish to thank her. I also wish to thank Nicholas Kubash as well for creating what is truly an absolutely beautiful and astounding book cover for the book. If you haven't seen it yet, I believe some people have already put the link up to the book. Please feel free to take a look at it. The book is available in print form. It became available yesterday. In time, meaning, hopefully no more than a week or two, we will also have a Kindle version as well. But please don't wait for that. Please get the print form of the book. You know, you can't smell a Kindle book, as I like to say sometimes in private. I don't think I've ever said that publicly. I love the smell of books. I love to actually hold the book in my hand. So I don't use Kindle, but I know many people do. So please get the book as soon as you can. And let me tell you, it is astounding news, actually. Apparently, already within a little bit more than, at this point, a little bit more than 24 hours, because the book just became available for purchase yesterday. So in a little bit over 24 hours, so many people have purchased the book to the point where it is now number one, the number one book in the category of Eastern philosophy. And that's saying a lot, actually, because there are quite a few books in Eastern philosophy. And the book itself is in several categories, but in that category, which is a big one, the book is number one within a little bit more than 24 hours after it became available. So this is certainly a book that we hoped would do very well, and it is indeed doing well beyond our wildest expectations. Just to let you know about the book, just for a minute or so, the book itself is exactly what the title indicates, an introduction to Sanatana Dharma. You know, it's interesting for people who know, my main book is called Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Natural Way. And interestingly, I actually wrote that book, meaning for that book to be an introduction to Sanatana Dharma. Apparently I was mistaken because the book itself is almost 500 pages, and many people told me that the book is actually rather philosophical. It's actually very deep, so it is serving its own extremely important purpose. So I realized that, no, I actually need to write something that is simple in format, where the wording is simple, easier to understand, and a much shorter book. And that's why I decided to write this book, this Introduction to Sanatana Dharma. The book itself is, I believe, only 162 pages versus almost 500 for our main Sanatana Dharma book. But it is indeed meant to be an introduction. And when I say an introduction, I mean quite literally for anyone who, let's say, if you were to have a conversation with them and you were to say, oh, I am practicing Sanatana Dharma, and if they were to say, Sanatana what? This is the book for them that will explain what this path is as far as the history, the practice, the philosophy, everything. Its contributions to global civilization, etc. This is the book that will do all that. So I would ask that you get the book as soon as you can, that you buy the book for others as well as a gift. The book is not expensive. It is, I believe, $11.99, so not very expensive, very affordable. And when you get the book, I would also ask that you please, if you don't mind, please do a positive review on the book on Amazon, because that will help us even more to make sure that Amazon itself will suggest the book to other people. The last thing I'm going to say about the book is this, that next Monday, we will indeed have our live stream as usual, but it will not be a usual live stream. Rather, what we're going to be doing, and this was the idea of several of my students actually, and I loved this idea. Next Monday, we're going to have a book release celebration. So at that point, as of right now, I don't even have a physical copy of the book because it just became available for purchase yesterday, but I will have one within days. So I will be showing you the book. I will be reading some passages from the book, discussing a few more things about the book. And then at that point, I will just take questions and answers from all of you in the audience. So again, that will be next Monday. So I hope that you can be here for that wonderful celebration for this new book that is out. So with that, I thank you for listening to that very exciting announcement. And what we're going to be doing today is, again, looking at a verse that describes several of the important divine opulences. These are not just attributes, but specifically they are considered to be opulences of God. And this is a very famous verse that is from the Vishnu Purana, and I've quoted it once before, I know, during a live stream. But I felt that this verse was so important to the point where I now want to comment on this verse. So we will now proceed with that. This verse is very specifically from, again, the Vishnu Purana, and it is from Vishnu Purana 6:547. And let me just say first, Vishnu Purana is one of the most important of all the Puranas. The two most important Puranas in existence are Vishnu Purana and Bhagavata Purana. And they're both very important. The Vishnu Purana tends to focus more on philosophy. So from a philosophical perspective, Vishnu Purana is extremely important. But then when it comes to the perspective of bhakti itself, what is the nature of devotion and understanding devotional consciousness in its highest sense, Bhagavata Purana, sometimes known as Srimad Bhagavatam, is a little bit more important. So that being said, this is from the Vishnu Purana, and I will read the verse to everyone, and then I will proceed to explain the verse. And this is Parāśara Muni, very, very important rishi, very, very important sage who is saying this. Bhagavan means he who possesses the 6 opulences in full, all affluence, all strength, all influence, all wisdom, all beauty, and all renunciation. Very nice. Very good. Well, this is the verse, and again, this is Parāśara Muni, who is one of the most important of all the ancient rishis that are found throughout the history of Sanatana Dharma, and who are found within the scriptures of Sanatana Dharma. You know, the scriptures of Sanatana Dharma themselves are revealed by such people as Parāśara Muni, individuals who are rishis, individuals who have the ability to transmit eternal truth. So this is one of these rishis. And this is what he is doing very specifically. Before I even dive into the verse, actually, I should probably explain this a little bit. He is giving a definition of what is one of the most important indicators of God, one of the most ways in which God is referred to. And that is the term Bhagavan, Bhagavan. So again, before I even dive into this verse, I want to explain a little bit about what is the nature of this word, this term, Bhagavan, why it's of importance, what is the nature of the terminology itself. First of all, there are several ways in which God can be addressed. The most direct way, of course, is via the actual names of God. And as we know, God has many, many, many different names in the Vedic scriptures. Krishna, Rama, just so many, many different names. And Narayana is one of these. In this particular case, with the actual names of God, those are very straightforward. They are the personal names of God. That is one way in which we can address God. The second way in which we can address God is via what are called honorifics. Honorifics. And there are several of these. The most prevalent of which is the term Shri. S-R-I or sometimes S-H-R-I, pronounced as the latter in any case, Shri. Shri meaning auspicious or auspicious one. And it's actually one of the names of Lakshmi Devi herself, which then is added to the names of different individuals, including God, including very, let's say, spiritually important beings. So therefore you will have gurus who are called Shri and then such and such. So these are honorifics. Then finally, there are descriptives, sometimes descriptive adjectives, sometimes descriptive nouns, but there are descriptives. And the term Bhagavan, very specifically, is indeed a descriptive. So this is the sort of, let's say, of nomenclature that is involved in addressing God. So this is what Bhagavan is. It's a descriptive, more so than a name, really. Because, interestingly, the term Bhagavan can be used for any form of God, and once in a while you'll even hear it ascribed to just a person who is so important, who is so spiritually opulent, to the point where the person is almost God-like. So it's more of a descriptive than anything. And as far as what the term Bhagavan means, of course, Parāśara Muni explains this, but first I want to give this little bit of grounding. Bhagavan comes from Bhaga. Bhaga means opulences. So one who has opulences is Bhaga. But Bhagavan is that individual, that being who, as Parāśara Muni explains here, doesn't merely have opulences, but has all opulences and fully. See, this is what's interesting. And this is what distinguishes, you see, this is yet another verse. And we go through so many verses. Those of you who have been through our live streams in the past, you've seen that we've gone through so many verses from throughout the totality of the Vedic scriptures, from the Puranas to the Vedas to the Upanishads to the Brahma Sutras, to so many verses that explain that we are not God, that there is indeed an important distinction, a necessary distinction in understanding between what is our self and what is that supreme self, Paramatman. And here again is yet another one. So thus, everyone has opulences. But what Parāśara Muni is explaining here is that what distinguishes ourselves from this Bhagavan, that is from God himself, is that it's not merely that he has opulences, but he has them in full. And again, this is the distinction. with any one of us, you can look at any particular being. You can look at yourself. Everyone has some opulences. Maybe you're good looking. Maybe you have money. Maybe you're intelligent. Maybe, and then fill in the blank. Maybe you're strong, etc. But you are none of these things to an infinite degree. In other words, fully and without exception and without lack. This is the distinction between, one of the distinctions, there are many distinctions, but this is one of the distinctions between ourselves and God. Every existent thing necessarily has attributes, that is, that by which you can detect its unique presence, its unique being. Everything has attributes. We have attributes, God has attributes. But the difference is, anything non-God has attributes that are limited in number, and those attributes are limited to their degree, to their scope, to their expanse. With God, on the other hand, God has an unlimited number of auspicious attributes, and each one of those attributes are unlimited. They are full. Now, speaking of Bhagavan, what Parāśara Muni is doing with this verse is, again, he's not merely speaking about this idea, this theological, this ontological idea of the let's say, the infinite nature of God's attributes, but very specifically, he wants to focus on 6 of these attributes that are opulent in nature. So thus they are bhaga, they are opulences. And again, this is one of the indicators of God, this term, Bhagavan. So now let's look at this verse. All right, so Bhagavan. Bhagavan means he who possesses these 6 opulences in full. So again, we've pretty much covered that. That is the definition of this term, Bhagavan. Not just someone who, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of wealth. No, they have full wealth. Not only is there no other being who has more wealth, but they have more wealth than every other being combined. And in fact, if you were to combine let's say, the affluence of every being in all of creation, in every single universe together, and try to compare that to the opulence of God, it would not even be a fraction. In fact, it would pale into almost non-existence, because God's affluence is quite literally unlimited. So, going back to the verse, Bhagavan means he who possesses these 6 opulences in full. Now let's look at these individual 6 opulences that Parāśara Muni decided to point out to us, to bring to our attention. First is what I just mentioned, all affluence. Now again, what is meant by all affluence? You know, by affluence, of course, in the materialistic, capitalistic, consumer-oriented modern West, in which many of us live. Not all of us, because we have people quite literally from throughout the world who are watching right now. Ultimately, we once the recording comes out, we tend to have people from approximately 140 nations who watch this. But for those individuals who indeed live in what they think is opulence, our understanding of opulence needs to be expanded more than merely bank account. What is meant by opulence is the blessings of Shri, the blessings of Lakshmi Devi. That means prosperity, and prosperity in every way. So you see, it's interesting. This is why I decided to make this word affluence rather than wealth. Sometimes you'll see the translation wealth. Wealth is too limited in understanding. Rather, it's affluence, prosperity, in the, let's say, Lakshmi-oriented sort of understanding of this. What it means to be prosperous is to have all that which one needs to thrive. So certainly that means actual wealth, but that means health. That means, again, all of the important jewels of this world that an individual needs, and not literally jewels, in some cases, yes, but all of the benefits that an individual needs in order to thrive in this world. So this is indeed one of the opulences of God. We all have something. Even the poorest of us, we have a quarter in our pocket. We have something. Some of us have more. Some of us have thousands of dollars in the bank. Some of us have multiple homes. You know, whatever it is, we all have some affluence. But again, this is the distinguishing feature, one of the distinguishing features between ourselves and God, is that at a certain point, there's a cutoff point. There's a maximal cutoff point in how much opulence we actually have. Of course, for some people, for some greedy people, in their minds, they don't want a cutoff point, but they have one nonetheless, regardless of their unlimited desire. Their actual affluence is indeed limited, but not for God. Rather, God is that being who contains all affluence and more. And this is inferential in this verse, but explicit in many other verses. It's not merely that God is the possessor of all affluence, but he is the source of all affluence. He is the source, indeed, of even the affluence of any living being who think that they have something. They have wealth, they have money, they have property, etc. It is God who is the source of that, ultimately. Did that person work hard to attain all those things? In some cases, yes. In other cases, as we know, no, not really. They inherited it, they stole it, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point of the matter is it is the blessing of God through which we have any affluence that we have. Now let's go on to the next opulence, and that is strength. Strength. Strength is another one of the opulences that indeed God has, and in which we can say the same thing. There is no being who doesn't have some strength. An ant has some strength. An ant is pretty strong, actually. Just as an aside, it's very interesting. You know, if you were to look at the amount of weight that an ant is capable of lifting in comparison to its own body weight, ants are very strong. Not compared to a human, though. So we all have varying amounts of strength. An ant has its own strength. A human has its own strength. Among humans, some humans are stronger than others. Some would have a difficult time lifting a dumbbell that was, 3 pounds, 5 pounds. Other people can easily lift a dumbbell that's 30 pounds, etc. We all have varying degrees of strength. And then, of course, if we look at other beings, an elephant is much stronger than a human being. You know, how much can a human being really lift? Well, an elephant can lift more, I assure you. In fact, in some countries, they are trained to do just that. They are trained to help in work by lifting very heavy things. So everyone has their strength. And of course, let's go deeper. What is meant by strength? Again, with all of these opulences, we have to look not merely on the surface level. So not merely literally physical strength. You see, God is not a physical being, yet he has all strength. So we're not merely talking about how much can you lift. We're not merely talking about a quantitative amount of strength, but rather all strength. Strength of purpose, strength of will, strength that is moral in nature, disciplined strength. Strength meaning that you take a vow to do X thing and nothing keeps you from doing X thing. That is strength. And we can go on and on. We're talking about not merely the external manifestation of strength, but we're talking about the internal manifestation of strength as well. So thus, when we're talking about strength, again, we're talking about strength in every aspect in which we can possibly conceive of what that term even means. Well, all of us, again, have strength to limited degrees. But envision this. God is that being who has, again, all strength of every variety, of every nature, fully and to an infinite degree, and even that is not impressive enough. On top of that, God is the source of strength, of all strength. So thus is the nature of the Absolute. As we go on with the rest of these opulences, I hope that increasingly you understand why this verse is of importance, and why it was of importance to Parāśara Muni to speak about these things. You see, understanding the attributes and the opulences and the nature of God helps us to understand what is the nature of that being upon whom we meditate. You see, this is why impersonalism doesn't work. This is why going to some new age spiritual coach fraud and the person telling you, just meditate on nothingness. No, you can't meditate on nothingness. It's actually an impossibility, and in fact, it's an oxymoron. You meditate on an object. A nothing is not an object. It's the opposite of an object. Oh, it's amazing how simple and foolproof this logic is, and yet again, sadly, for so many New Age individuals, they can't see the simple logic of such things. No, we are to meditate on something. That being the case, to simply say, meditate on God. All right, what does that mean? We have to understand what are those divine attributes and opulences of God. We need to understand what is God. Upon what am I meditating? Upon what is this object? That is why such verses as this are of such great importance. They help us to envision in our meditation what is this divine object upon which we focus our meditative awareness. So with that understanding, now you know why we're looking at this verse. Let's go on a little bit more to the rest of these opulences. All influence. All influence. Very, very interesting. So every being has influence to some degree or another. And again, like as I've been saying with these other opulences, not just in the immediate, but to subtle degrees as well. What is meant by influence? Well, certainly it means that, let's say, you are some sort of leader in either your community or your family or your neighborhood or your job or someplace. But again, it means much more than that. What does it mean to have influence? It means to have influence certainly in that more immediate and easy to understand sort of way. That is that when you speak, others listen. You know, this is something that, of course, many, many people yearn for. This is why we have celebrities. This is why we have politicians. This is why we have anybody who is a so-called influencer on social media, whether it's on YouTube. We have all these people with their channels where they just drone on and on about nothing, but they want influence. They are thus influencers. And we have influencers in so many different capacities, so many different fields, etc. But again, what is meant by influence? It's not merely the idea of fame, the idea that when you speak, others listen, but influence in every sense. Influence meaning that more than anything, your will is done. Your will is done. It's that almost Nietzschean idea of will to power, the idea that you have influence in that what it is that you will. You have the ability to influence that which is around you, your very environment itself. And we can go on. But again, all of us, to make it sound somewhat similar to the other opulences, all of us have influence to some degree. Even those of us who think we have zero influence, we have influence. We have influence. Even if you are quote-unquote a nobody, even if you're someone who, yes, you have nothing to you, you have nothing to your name, complain to some company about some slight that they committed toward you, you'll have influence. They will listen to you. They will listen to you. They care about your opinion. Or at least they seem to. So it doesn't matter who we are. We can be the lowliest person in the world. We have influence. You can be a child. You have influence over your parents. Start to cry. Your parents will run to you and want to find out what's wrong, what's happening, etc. All of us have influence to varying degrees. Some individuals have a minimum amount of influence. Others are, again, celebrities, big media personalities, big politicians, etc. They have a lot more influence. In any case, think of the most influential people who exist on the planet today. Think of anyone, a massive religious leader, again, a very important world leader, quote unquote, a big politician, the biggest celebrities on earth. Their influence is highly limited. Indeed, some people couldn't care less what any of these people have to say. I'm happy to say I'm one of them. So their influence is limited, no matter how big they think they are. But now, in speaking of God, God's influence is absolute. God's influence is absolute. God is that being who has influence, not just in one country, not just in one sector of society, not just at one time in human history, not just on one planet, not just on a solar system, galaxy, a multitude of planets. not just one universe. God's influence extends to all of spiritual and material reality. Such is the nature of God's influence. And God's influence is exhibited, not merely is manifest, not merely in what he has to say and dependent upon whether people will or will not listen to that. No, God's influence exists on every single level, on every single strata of existence. So God influences the environment. Indeed, God upholds the environment. Such is the power of God's influence that without that influence, that is, without the very presence of God in reality, reality itself would cease. None of us have that influence. Only God. So thus God is God. I am not God. And you definitely are not God. God is God. Now let's go on. All wisdom. All wisdom. Very important one. Very, very important. Wisdom. In the past, meaning especially in Europe during the classical era, and certainly throughout much of the rest of the world, throughout ancient India, ancient China, ancient Japan, much of the entire world, the idea of wisdom was something that was much more appreciated in the past. People sought wisdom. People understood the value, the virtue of wisdom. People understood that you can have, indeed, any of these other opulences. I'm talking about we as humans. You can have any of these other opulences and more. But if you do not have wisdom, you have nothing, because you will lose all those other opulences because you're a fool. So the value of wisdom is something that was understood, again, in the classical era, not so much anymore. Sadly, people see the word and they understand maybe the definition of the word, but people don't quite understand how important it is indeed to have wisdom. And the truth of the matter is, like with these other opulences, everyone, even the most foolish among us, have some wisdom. You know, you can look at the most foolish person, and even they intuitively, instinctually, even if it's almost on just a biological level, they will have the wisdom to avoid pain, to avoid danger, etc. Again, it's more instinctual than something that's discursive or thought-based in nature. But even the most unintelligent people among us have a little bit of wisdom to at least, again, avoid their own self-destruction for the most part. And then, of course, you have individuals who, no, they have a lot more wisdom, you know. And then you have those individuals who are extremely wise. Those individuals who, they are a minority. They have sought wisdom. They have looked for wisdom for much of their life. And as a result, indeed, they have a lot of wisdom. And again, like with all of these other bhagas, like with all of these other opulences, you can find the wisest people in the world, individuals who they really do understand the nature of true knowledge, and they have a grasp of a true ability to think rationally, etc. They are accessing their buddhi, their wisdom faculty, very, very well. But even their wisdom is limited. Limited, limited. It is God alone who has all wisdom. And this is the case for several reasons. Actually, some very interesting metaphysical reasons. Only a few of which we have the ability to go into right now, sadly. But one of these is the fact that God's wisdom covers not only that which is known to all, let's say, discursively oriented human beings, but God's wisdom also covers that which is known only to God. Think about that. There are subject matters that are so subtle to the point where we quite literally are not even capable of knowing them, and only God can. And God has full wisdom in those areas as well. And more, in all fields of wisdom, God's wisdom, again, is quite literally infinite. And to repeat this again, and I will continue to repeat this because it's crucial, it's not just that God has infinite wisdom. God is the source of infinite wisdom. You see, this is what makes God God. Even more so than having all of these opulences infinitely, is that God doesn't merely possess these things. He is the source of these things. In other words, all of these things that God has, all of these opulences that God has, God is not subject to even an infinite degree of these opulences. It's not that God revels in the fact like we would. You see, if you had all the wealth in creation, you would revel in that fact. God does not revel in the fact that he has all of these opulences to an infinite degree, but rather they are his servants. An amazing thing to think of. But indeed, God is the source of all wisdom. And this is why when we seek true knowledge, where is the primary place that we should seek? The scriptures, yes, but go deeper. Wise people, the true gurus, authentic gurus and acharyas, yes. Our own true and authentic realizations and meditation, yes. But what is the source of even all that? It is God. God is the source of all truth. God is the source of all knowledge. And this is why, again, and we've looked at verses in the past in different live streams, where it will indeed say this, that the source of all knowledge, the first of all gurus, Adi Guru, is God. And why is that the case? Well, now we understand why it's the case, because God is indeed the source of all wisdom. All beauty is the next one. All beauty. This is, for me, one of the most important ones. Despite that being the case, I'm not going to speak about it as deeply as I could, because then we'd be here for several hours. God is the source of all beauty. Beauty itself is a Shakti. Beauty itself is not a thing. You see, it's unfortunate in the modern materialistic world, the world of empiricism. When we think of beauty as something that merely affects our senses. We think of that object, that thing, and that thing itself is beautiful. Not understanding that, no, that thing itself possesses beauty. And beauty itself is not merely what we are seeing, what we are hearing. Oh, I'm hearing beautiful music. No, you're hearing sounds that are possessed of beauty. You are seeing objects that are possessed of beauty. And it's a subtle yet crucial shift in understanding that we need to make if we are to understand what is truly the nature of the aesthetic. Something that I myself have studied for decades, actually, the actual nature of the aesthetic. Again, the aesthetic is not based merely upon the empirical, but rather beauty itself is a Shakti. It is a power. When we are seeing something beautiful, what we're seeing in what we call that beauty is not the object itself, but what that object possesses, this Shakti known as beauty that affects us, not merely in a sensory way, but that is perceived in a sensorially, but which affects us spiritually, affects us within. So thus, when we speak of this true understanding of beauty, beauty itself is something that is of the nature of the spiritual. Again, as a Shakti, as a power, as an energy, because it's not just any power, it's not just any energy, it's God's Shakti, it's God's power, God's energy. So thus, this is why it's always been understood by the true sages of the past. Interestingly, including Plato in the Western world, Plato wrote about this, that beauty is one of the avenues by which, one of the paths by which we can know God, by exploring what is truly, in the spiritual sense that I was just explaining, what is truly the nature of beauty, and how beauty is, again, something which, like all these other opulences, it's not merely that God has beauty to an infinite degree, fully, but God is the source of that. God is the source of that Shakti, that power of beauty that affects us so, to the point where there is no being who does not seek beauty. There is no being who does not seek beauty. Some beings are in such illusion that what they consider to be beauty is something warped, but at least subjectively it is beautiful to them. So even if indirectly they think they're seeking beauty, thus they are. They just don't know what real beauty is. they're seeking beauty nonetheless. Even the most callous of individuals, even the most degenerate of individuals, unbeknownst to even themselves, they're seeking beauty. So thus all beings really, even if unbeknownst to themselves, are seeking God. So beauty is indeed one of these paths by which we know God. And again, for myself personally, this is something that I have explored for decades, both philosophically and experientially. This is why in true culture, in true civilization, Vedic civilization, for example, but again, also the Greco-Romans, any of these truly wondrous dharmic civilizations of the past, they celebrated beauty as a manifestation of the spiritual, of the transcendent. So with that understanding, all of us have beauty to some degree, even the most quote-unquote ugliest of us. There is something about everyone that is quote-unquote beautiful, even if it's minimal, even if it's just one little thing. But God has all beauty, has full beauty, and more is the very source of that beauty itself. And then finally, all renunciation. Now, this is always an interesting opulence. And it's very interesting that Parāśara Muni decided to include this in this list of 6 opulences. Because again, you'll remember, hopefully, maybe, when I gave my talk about being strong. This was maybe 2 live streams ago. Be Strong, it was called. Go watch that video if you haven't, because this video will help you to understand strength. But this was one of the qualities, one of the traits, one of the characteristics of being strong that I mentioned, was renunciation. And interestingly, this is true for all of us, again, for all of we individuals who are limited Atmans. But in this case, Parāśara Muni is speaking about God. Why is renunciation an opulence? Why is it considered to be an aspect of strength? This is the reason why. And there are several reasons, actually. But again, just due to time, I can only go through one of these reasons. When you look at all of these opulences, all these 6 opulences, if you or someone else, if a human being had any or all, what to speak of all of these opulences to a big degree, forget about an unlimited degree, that's not possible for us, but let's say we had these opulences to a really big degree, it would, for most, if not all of us, for most of us, it would be almost impossible to also simultaneously practice full renunciation. In other words, we would let it get to our head. And we would start to use these tools to abuse others. Again, not all of us. This is not true for the sage. This is not true for the liberated yogi. But the vast majority of individuals who are in illusion. Let's say you had tremendous affluence, tremendous strength, tremendous influence, etc., etc. For the vast majority of human beings, eventually, they would not be able to practice the healthy sort of renunciation or detachment that is necessary to not abuse those opulences. So thus, they would use these things to self-pleasure themselves, to just pleasure and pleasure and pleasure themselves, and to abuse others, to try to control other people. Indeed, we've seen this with so many of the world's billionaires today, that we see these individuals. So for example, just to pick one example of many, these silicon sultans, as I call them, these individuals who became wealthy overnight, became billionaires, and previous to that they were really nobodies, and they allow it to get to their head. And because they have all these opulences, what do they try to do? Control others. They don't have renunciation. They don't have that sense of detachment. Well, why is this important? To understand the goodness of God, to understand the self-constraint of God, to understand the absolute self-mastery that God possesses, that indeed He has all opulences, all auspicious attributes and qualities to an infinite degree, and yet He will never abuse them. He has that renunciation, such that it doesn't mean anything to Him. Again, not in that controlling sense, not in that egotistical sense. So thus, this is the nature of God, that He has that ability. Very good. Wonderful. Well, I can, of course, as always, say much more about this verse, but I'm going to stop myself there. Again, a truly interesting verse, a verse which on a surface reading, a person can just read this in a few seconds and just kind of move on to something else, not understanding just how deep this verse is, and for that matter, all the verses of the Vedic scriptures. But with that, I thank you for listening to my discourse on this beautiful verse by Parāśara Muni. And with that, let me signal now, if you have any questions about any aspect of Vedic spirituality, please feel free to begin to ask your questions. Very good. Let me answer this very quickly, actually, because it only requires a quick answer. This is from Siddharth, and it's a good question, actually. And that is, Namaste Acharyaji, what is the significance of reciting the Shiva Mahimna Stotra? Is Shiva also called an Adi Yogi who is the original source of yoga, Hatha Yoga? Very good. I'm glad that you put that in parentheses, Hatha Yoga. And for those yoga teachers out there, let me just tell you, it's not Hatha Yoga. It's not TH as in the word the. It's not Hatha. It's Hatha Yoga. It's a aspirate retroflex, Hatha Yoga. Lord Shiva is indeed the originator specifically of the school known as Hatha Yoga. Not all yoga. Not at all. Narayana is the originator of all yoga. He is the ultimate Adi Guru, that is first Guru overall. But Lord Shiva is indeed the Adi Guru, let's say smaller case, that is the founder of the specific school known as Hatha Yoga. And sadly, some people make this mistake of thinking that Hatha Yoga specifically only means the asanas. No, that's not the case. Hatha Yoga is a separate entire philosophical system and school. And it's different from Ashtanga Yoga, the Ashtanga system of Patanjali. So, yes, Shiva is the Adi Guru specifically of the school of yoga known as Hatha Yoga. So I hope that answers that. Good. Here's an interesting question, and this is from Connor. Krishna states, we can reincarnate in higher states or lower states. If one reincarnates in a lesser state, do they literally reincarnate as an animal, or do they reincarnate with less divine insight? Very good. Yes. Let me say, if you look at the totality of the number of species that exist in any given universe, and that means not just the ones that we encounter on Earth. Certainly it means animals, plants, germs, humans, and the vast strata of humans, because humans are not all equal. There are some humans who are vastly superior to the humans we encounter on Earth. They live on other planets. But then the gods, etc., and the various strata of gods. There is a hierarchical strata of gods going all the way up to Brahma himself, not Brahman, but Brahma, who is the creator being. If we look at all these various species, these are all Atman. These are all living beings. And the reason why they are in one form versus another is because of their own karma, and thus they reincarnated. So when Krishna indeed says this, that yes, we can reincarnate into higher or lower states, it can be anything. As far as the lower states, not merely animals, lesser humans, savage humans, humans who have very low IQ, etc. It can be, yes, indeed, animals. It can be trees, plants, etc. And then conversely, this is also true for higher states. So yes, in the process of reincarnation, due to our own free will decisions, our moral and ethical decisions, and how we form our attitudes and consciousness, we create our future, and thus we will be reincarnated accordingly. So I hope that answers the question. And please give me a few moments. And I apologize. I know my talk took a little bit longer than usual, so we don't have a lot of time. So I'm necessarily having to skip some questions and, just pick very, very strategically here because, again, we have little time. Interesting. Okay, this is an interesting question that no one has ever asked, and I will answer this. This is from Vasil, and it is Namaste Acharyaji. Is there something in Sanatana Dharma similar to Stephen McNallen's blot on a mountain peak ritual? Does climbing mountains help us spiritually in any way, and if so, how? Excellent question, actually. And indeed, there is such a thing as mountain sadhana. Very, very interesting that you ask this. It is, of course, something that it's written about in the scriptures. It's something that, interestingly, some people even do to this day. You'll have pilgrims who do this. You'll have actual yogis, for example, high up indeed in the Himalayas. But there are indeed benefits to doing certain rituals, certain practices very high up in mountains. And I could actually talk about this for hours because it's fascinating and it's something that I know quite a bit about, but I'll just mention a few things. So for example, just to state a few very simple things like pranayama, for example. Pranayama is something that is best done in a higher elevation. That being the case, both practically looking at modernity because of the fact that there's tremendous pollution versus when you go a little bit higher in mountains, the air tends to be a little bit purer, a little bit more rarefied, etc. So thus the prana is more concentrated. So this is one thing. Doing rituals themselves, that is even pujas, yagyas, etc., higher up, in higher elevations, according to the Vedic scriptures, is something that is very much encouraged because indeed we have closer access to the gods. And this is meant very practically, not just in the let's say, geographical idea that we are literally physically closer to the gods because we're higher, but also we're further away from the cacophony of human beings. We're further away from the rajas, the passion and the energy, and again, the cacophony of materialistic civilization. So the higher up we go in mountains, indeed, we find that the atmosphere is more meditative and thus more conducive for conducting ritual. And then even geographically, actually, we are closer to certainly the atmospheric divinities as well as the celestial divinities. And as you can see, I can go on and on about this. It's something I know quite a bit about. There are indeed certain rituals that you do exclusively in mountainous areas as well. But yeah, we don't have time to go into that. But yes, there is a lot to be said about mountain sadhana. That's what I'll call it, actually. But yes, there is a lot that is there in Vedic practice. But with the limited time we have, let me see if I can answer a few more questions. Michael Maldonado, thank you very much. My pleasure. Always my pleasure. I could never pass up on such questions as this, so I'm going to answer this. And again, my apologies just due to time. This may be the last question I'll be able to get to tonight. But please don't lose hope. Come next Monday and we will have a nice opportunity for questions and answers. But this question is, Namaste, would you recommend, and it's two questions. Namaste, would you recommend for us to move to Omaha? And also, how does one regain strength and piety after a serious episode of depression and spiritual failure? Realizing God's presence again. Very good. So this is, again, two questions, actually. First of all, as far as moving to Omaha, indeed, you may remember that for one entire video several months ago, I revealed to everyone that the International Sanatana Dharma Society has a project called the Vedic Heartland Initiative. And it's with the idea that indeed we wish to build a Vedic community in the Omaha, Nebraska area. And in fact, we're being quite successful with this. We've already had several people move here. We have quite a few people also planning on moving here this year, especially during summertime, which is the best time to move, etc. So this is what I would say, is that really the individuals who we want to move here, and hopefully this includes you, I don't know, because I don't know who you are. We want to encourage individuals to move here who are very sincere practitioners of Sanatana Dharma, and who are very specifically dedicated to Sanatana Dharma as it is taught by the International Sanatana Dharma Society. So let us say this is not, let's say, for lack of a better term, some sort of pan-Hindu sort of project where, the idea is that, we just want anyone who considers themselves to be a Hindu to move here. You're free to, I mean, it's a city, but as far as being a part of our Vedic heartland, we would certainly ask that, indeed, you be committed members and or followers of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. And if that is the case, and doing your own research, if you feel that Omaha is a better place in every way than you are living presently, then yes, I would certainly encourage you to come here. Now, as far as the second part of your question, how does one regain strength and piety after a serious episode of depression and spiritual failure, realizing God's presence again? First of all, you have my absolute sympathies, and please know that you're not alone. And indeed, that's why I wanted to answer this question, is because I know that you're not alone. There are so many people who have experienced severe depression, including even people who are pretty spiritual, actually. This is, again, the differentiation between how I teach versus New Age nonsense. New Age people want to give you the idea that, once you buy, almost literally buy their version of spirituality, all your problems are gone. And that's not necessarily the case. And I am always honest with people. Simply because you are a spiritual person, that doesn't mean that you will never again experience depression or sadness or have something terrible happen, some traumatic thing, have someone you truly love pass away or something like this. No, you will still have tragedies, and you will still periodically experience depressions. So please understand that you're not alone. This is something that happens once in a while, even to spiritual people. So understand that. Now, that being said, as far as what you do to overcome that depression, that's not so much what I want to talk about, because I have in the past. So please refer to previous videos. Plus, again, we just don't have the time. What I want to talk about specifically is how to rekindle that spiritual fire within you, despite the fact that you experience depression, because it sounds like that's specifically what you're asking me. And let me just say this. It is by watering the root of that tree of bhakti, that tree of spiritual fulfillment. You need to water that spiritual tree that is there within you, within your heart, as much as possible. In other words, even though right now, I understand, having experienced tremendous depression, it may seem that even spirituality itself may seem like a dry desert right now. It may seem like, that joy, that bliss, that optimism that maybe was there during better times, it just seems to be gone now. And even trying to do something spiritual, doing meditation, doing any sort of thing like this, may seem almost itself a little bit empty and a little bit dry to you. How do you make even the driest desert fertile? You water it. You give it as much water as it needs until it comes to the point where it is fertile again. In the same way, with the example I was giving, if you see this bhakti, this devotion, this experience of the presence of God, as you say it so nicely, if you see that the tree of this bhakti is itself something that has been lacking nutrition for so long, trust me, it's not dead. It is a tree that cannot die. It is a tree that cannot die. It's always alive. It may become dry, but it will never die. So what do? even despite the fact that, yes, things may seem a little bit lifeless right now spiritually for you, you continue to nourish yourself spiritually by, number one, first of all, seeking association. This is the number one thing I'm going to tell you. It may surprise people. People may have thought I was going to say, oh, meditate more. Actually, seek association. In other words, look for individuals, either in your community, and if not, don't worry about that. Do it online. Indeed, people have been talking about the Discord server that we have, this 24/7 live chat that we have for people dedicated to the ISDS. Indeed, join that if you're not on there already. Seek association of other individuals who are on the path, who have wisdom, who have their own very positive experiences, and befriend them and talk to them as friends. You know, share with them what you're going through and listen to their advice. And more, also, don't just have it be a one-way street. You see, this is also how you rekindle yourself. Is not just that you share with others the woes that you have been experiencing, but you help others too. You listen to them. It is in helping others, it is in performing caiva that we get over depression. It is by lifting ourselves out of ourselves, by doing caiva, by doing service to others, that, not immediately, not like magic, but in time, indeed, we lift ourselves out of that depression. So begin with this. Seek good spiritual association. And the International Sanatana Dharma Society exists exactly for this, to give you, and really everyone listening, good spiritual association. Having done that, then indeed rekindle all of your practices. Don't give up on meditation. Don't give up on puja. Don't give up on ritual. Don't give up on reading the Vedic scriptures, on doing yoga, on doing all the practices that you need to do. Because in time, if you continue to do these things, that sweetness will come to you again. That sweetness will come to you again, I promise you. But it starts with association. And in the meantime, for whatever they're worth, you have my blessings and my good thoughts, and I wish you the best. But please do that. And in the future, only if you desire, let us know how it went. So with that, I'm going to stop there. I went a little bit over time, but it was important to do so in this case. We are sadly going to have to stop here, and as always, I apologize if I did not have a chance to get to your questions. Please come again next Monday. And again, to remind you, next Monday we will be having our book release celebration to celebrate our new book that just came out, Introduction to Sanatana Dharma. If you have not gotten the book yet, it just became available yesterday. Please look at the link, which I'm sure several people hopefully have put up. Several of our moderators have hopefully put up that link to the book. It is apparently #1 right now in the category of Eastern philosophy, which is amazing after just one day. And if you have not yet done so, please subscribe to this channel. As you can see, this channel is not like any other spiritual channel on any platform whatsoever. Please subscribe. Please like this video, because that helps other people then to see it, because it boosts the algorithms. When you have a chance, please visit our website, dharmacentral.com. When you're there, you'll see many, many interesting things, including you'll see our bookstore. I don't believe, sadly, the new book is not up there yet because, again, it just got published 24 hours ago, but hopefully we'll have it up there very soon. But again, you can just follow the link to get that book. But we have our other books that are there as well. We have a beautiful musical mantra CD that's available, etc. We even have t-shirts, mugs, all of these things, all of which support our work as a nonprofit religious movement. Also, when you're there, please consider becoming a member, a tithing member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. If you look on the menu, you'll see membership. And please feel free to become a member. That helps us to help others. That helps us to help you and to continue with this mission that we are doing. Also, when there, the last thing I'll say, when you're at dharmacentral.com, please join our email list. You'll see almost immediately when you come to our website that you can join our email list. And in that way, we will keep you informed of all the new developments of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. So with that, again, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for all of your wonderful questions. Please join us next Monday for our book release celebration. And with that, I ask you to please take very good care of yourselves in every way. And namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate. Victory to Sanatana Dharma. Victory to the Dharma Nation. Victory to the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Evam bhavattu. May it be so. And everyone, please take very good care of yourselves until we see each other again.